To wrap up this discussion of vertical integration, one of the things you have to consider is the transaction costs. What does it cost you to be doing this outside your business, to be negotiating with suppliers, to be validating their work, to be monitoring what they're doing? What sort of secrets do I put out there when I have to turn to external suppliers versus what could I protect if I kept it in-house? And so I teased this on the other slide or the other video, but you're going to find over time that what companies choose to do and not do is a very big deal in their strategy. Let's go on and look at the final topic of diversification. That's unrelated diversification. This is where companies have portfolios underneath them that really don't seem to have much to do with one another. And I'll give you a household name that, well, I shouldn't say it's not a household name, but it's one that people know is United Technologies. They've got jet engine manufacturers, elevator companies, all sorts of things in United Technologies that are different. Same thing with a company called Textron. They've got golf carts and helicopter manufacturers, business jet manufacturers, very diverse range of businesses. But the one I want to talk about is one that you've probably not heard about, and that's a company called Danaher. Danaher has over 66,000 employees spread across 5 business units and in about 36 different companies. So 36 companies, 5 business units, 66,000 people. And they are in everything. They are in dental, manufacturing, life sciences manufacturing, testing equipment, industrial. Those are their major divisions. And they don't necessarily have anything to do with one another. Danaher just loosely clusters them in these 5 areas, and they create these the 5 divisions to manage these companies. But I'm going to tell you something about those 5 divisions a little bit later. There's only one common thread to every company that Danaher owns, and that is the fact that it's a manufacturing company. Early on, well, what we now know is the Toyota production system, the lean manufacturing just in time. Danaher was a very early adopter of that system. They call it the Danaher business system. So they buy these different manufacturing companies and they do one thing. They institute their lean processes, the Danaher business system, in every single one of them. And so what they say is what we add as a company, we Danaher, is understanding how to run a manufacturing company. We may not know the product, we may not know the processes, we may not know the end market, but that's okay because we know how to make these businesses run more efficiently. So that is their core competency. But what the management adds in that is a knowledge of what's a good acquisition. They've done over 400, which obviously they've consolidated since they only have 36 companies. What's a good acquisition to make that happen? And then we put the people in place, the right people in place. So look at Danaher, 66,000 employees. Corporate headquarters has just a little over 100 employees in it. Just a little over 100 employees managing 36 different companies with 66,000 people, many of them overseas. How do they do that? Very simple. They hire the right management team and put it in place, and then they hold them accountable. If they don't deliver the results, the management team is gone, and they bring a new management team in. That's all Danaher does. So they are, management is core competency. We know how to pick leaders. We know how to hold them accountable. We understand our business system. Then they talk about the portfolio management. In fact, if you look in their documents, they'll even talk about investing in businesses that are counter-cyclical. In other words, when some of our businesses tend to be down, other of our businesses would naturally, the way the market ebbs and flows, tend to be stronger. And through this, we can have efficient internal markets and take the profits off of the up companies, invest them wisely into the down companies when the market is low, maybe resources are cheap, and when their market comes back, they're better positioned. So this is the basic idea of an unrelated diversification. We know management, we understand the value of companies, we know how to allocate capital, and we hold people accountable for the results. And it has worked fairly well. But what are the current trends with diversification? Unrelated diversification is on the way out, or has been for many years really on the way out. Some of that is historical. When you go back to the 1950s and the 1960s, antitrust laws were much more stringent than they are today. There weren't many consolidation moves allowed. So if a company had surplus capital and they wanted to go out and grow their business, they had no choice but to do it in unrelated areas because they weren't going to be allowed to invest in related areas. Plus, they had strong tax incentives to do so. The personal income tax rates were much higher, so shareholders would say, don't pass that to me in the form of dividends because I have to pay a lot of tax on that. You find a way to invest that money for me in other businesses. Well, that's largely changed. So you don't see companies making the move into unrelated businesses nearly as much. You'd even have people say that unrelated diversification is wrong. Well, but you have companies like Danaher that are doing it very well and very profitably. Plus, you think about some private equity companies. These follow the same basic Danaher model. We know how to buy businesses. We know how to put people into place. We know how to hold them accountable, and we get great results. And then you have the world's most famous investor, Warren Buffett, with Berkshire Hathaway. He owns a business jet leasing company. He owns railroads. He owns manufactured housing businesses. He owns insurance companies. So he's in a ton of different industries, and it seems to work out pretty well for Berkshire Hathaway. What the research says is, though, that the further you go away from your core business, typically it's harder to turn a profit. And so that's one of the reasons people say unrelated diversification doesn't work. But as always, around this line that you see on the chart, there's a lot of variation. None of these corporate moves are panacea, guaranteed to work. What works is sound business practices, well executed. And so regardless of where you are in your diversification strategy, provided you've got the right underpinnings and you execute it well, it can work. We're next going to step into the topic of mergers and acquisitions.